Prime Minister Allen Chastanet says the government had stated its intentions to borrow the US $30 million from the International Development Association in its 2020-2021 budget. Some have questioned the level of borrowing during a pandemic and the impact on debt. The government on Tuesday sought parliamentary authorization in the House of Assembly to borrow US $30 million from the International Development Association to finance the COVID-19 response, recovery and resilience development policy program. Chastanet says the government was awaiting approval from the World Bank before it went to Parliament.
The $30 million from the World Bank was identified from day one. So when we presented the budget last year, we identified several sources for monies. CDB was one of them, the Taiwanese $20 million repurposing of the loan, the rapid response facility from the IMF, and the $30 million, which was the IDA repurposing loan. So this is no new borrowing. This is not like the government's coming after the fact to borrow money. These were monies that were identified very clearly in my budget presentation earlier in the year. And what we're doing is executing it. So we had to wait for the World Bank board approval before we could come back to Parliament to seek Parliament's approval. But certainly identified as a source of funding that had already been identified. This is not any new additional borrowing above and beyond what we had.
Chastanet says the loan will help make up for the shortfall in revenue caused by the pandemic.
We knew and had anticipated that there would be a significant revenue shortfall based on COVID, which there was. We had projected that tourism revenue would be down 50%. To date, that's exactly what the number has been. And also we knew that we would have the additional expenses. And sadly, coming out of Christmas and New Year's with the spike in cases, that has now cost us additional revenues. We've had to go back and reopen a couple of the hotels. The testing has gone, through the roof, and operations at Victoria Hospital. So all of these are coming with additional expenses.
Meanwhile, First Deputy Leader of the Opposition St. Lucia Labour Party, Castries South MP Dr. Ernest Hilaire, is optimistic that some of the US $30 million will be allocated for income support.
I am hoping that the government does allocate a substantial part for that. I wouldn't be surprised if they do, because the elections is coming. They spent a lot of the money they've borrowed on other things. So finally you must give the people something. I mean, it would be outrageous if a government does not do that. But again, you never know with this government. They have made it very clear that they do not believe in giving what they see as handouts to people. And it always blows my mind away when they say that in the House, that if you help people who are in need, vulnerable, they are making mendicants of them. But when you give businesses all the concessions and incentives, what are you making out of them? So my thing is, I expect the government to give the people more this time, but I wouldn't be surprised if they don't. And I wouldn't be surprised if they do, because the people are crying, the people are suffering.
The government also sought parliamentary approval to borrow US $7.378 million from the Caribbean Development Bank from its ordinary capital resources. This will also consist of an amount of US $4.178 million from the equity and market resources of the Caribbean Development Bank. Gina Filippi, HTS News Force.